Beckett Sennecke is getting a lot of attention as a fast riser in the upcoming NHL draft. Is that for reasons, or is it just because one team really, really wants him? We're going to talk about that on today's Locked On Blue Jackets.
You're Locked On Blue Jackets, your daily podcast on the Columbus Blue Jackets, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Hello and welcome to Locked On Blue Jackets, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. I am, as always, your host, Jay Foster, here to give you the good, bad, and the ugly about your favorite team and mine, the Columbus Blue Jackets. Before we get started, I want to thank everyone for making this your first listen of the day every single day. Locked On Blue Jackets is free and available on all podcast platforms and over on YouTube. I also want to let you know that today's episode is brought to you by FanDuel. Make every moment more because right now new customers are going to get $150 in bonus bets with any winning $5 bet. Just visit FanDuel.com/locked-on to get started. We got another prospect profile. Today, we are talking to Hadi Kalakeche, the other half of Locked On NHL Prospects. We had Sebastian on at the start of the week. We got Hadi on at the end of the week. And we're going to talk about Beckett Sennecke, who is a really interesting story because I can't quite tell if he is rising because sometimes a rise has happened, like TJ Ginla, which we talked about earlier in the week, or is he rising just because one team really, really likes him? That team is not the Blue Jackets, but I'm interested to kind of figure out what the story is for Sennecke. So I've got Hadi to come and talk to me about that, and I'm just going to get into my conversation with him because he is much smarter than I am about many, many things, but especially prospects. Every year, I feel like there's always a couple of players that just shoot up the draft rankings for no reason other than it seems like one team likes them. And this year, there's a couple of players like that, but I feel like Beckett Sennecke is a guy who, maybe 3 weeks ago, I hadn't heard of. Mm-hmm. And then all of a sudden, he's probably going 5th overall to the Montreal Canadiens. And I decided that, A, we should probably torture Habs fans about that because I think it's funny. But maybe not today. I've got Hadi Kalakeche of one half of Locked On NHL Prospect, works over at Dobber Prospect, knows a lot of things about a lot of things, especially when it comes to prospects. So I thought, who better to talk to about Sennecke than one of the longest suffering Habs fans I know. So let's kind of start off with just kind of a basic, what kind of player is Sennecke?
Sennecke's an improviser. So he's a player who really kind of runs and guns it on the fly. He's a 6'2", 181-pound body, which is not bad, although he has grown like 5 or 6 inches in the last year and a half, which will do things to your game. I mean, he's still figuring out how to use his body, he's still figuring out how to kind of, protect pucks along the boards, how to win puck battles, all that stuff. But, you can tell that he's on the verge of kind of understanding it, but still. What's really interesting about Sennecke is the hands, and that's been there since before he started growing. He's always been a really skilled, really adept handler. But like I said, he improvises a lot. So he'll get a puck, he'll skate it up the ice and kind of figure it out as he goes, rather than kind of having a set plan or anticipating what's going on. He heads into plays, makes a deke, another deke. All of a sudden, he's in front of the net, shooting into the back of the net. A lot of his sequences will be like that. He's a really interesting player. I especially like the defensive game. For a player who was undersized a year and a half ago, it's really important to be able to put your stick in the right lanes, to understand play defensively, to know where to position yourself. Sennecke has a good understanding of that. He's been good on retrievals, and he's been good on the back check as well. So I categorize him as a defensively responsible, improvisational winger who can deke the lights out. Again, the hands are really the standout trait for me.
He had a pretty good playoffs with Oshawa, but is that one of the reasons that because like I kind of said at the start, is he has shot up draft boards. He was a guy that, like I said, maybe 3 weeks ago hadn't heard of, and then suddenly he's a guy that might go top 10. He's a guy that might go top 5. Mm-hmm. Is that due to, in part, to kind of almost not necessarily recency bias, but a good playoffs will do a lot for a draft eligible player? Or is it just that you think that there's teams out there that really like him and that's influencing, I feel like Bob McKenzie's rankings are especially influenced on what teams like what players? Why do you think Beckett has shot so far up the rankings so fast?
Well, I think it's first the progress in his game over the season. He headed into the season, which is kind of an off season of physical training, not a lot to kind of work with in terms of, how do I use my newfound size? And as the year has gone on, he's just gotten better and better at using it. I mean, there's that, and there's also the fact that, I mean, I'm in close contact with our OHL scout. Shout out to Jordan Harris at Dauber Prospects. He was the first to kind of flag Sennecke as, for him, a 15 to 25 pick. Very, very early. We're talking September, October. He was already talking about Sennecke in this way. So, you know, it really does depend on what approach you take with your prospects and what you like. But I think that overall, you know, some people have been talking about Sennecke in this range for a while. Not as high as fifth. I don't think anyone would agree that far. If you just look back to kind of January, February, Sennecke was on boards, but, you know, as a mid to late first rounder, not as a potential top 5 pick. But yeah, I think it's really the progress in his game, the fact that he's learned some intricate ways in how to use his size a bit better, has gotten better at kind of putting his knee out, putting his shoulder out, protecting pucks as he's driving the net, kind of showing more of the power forward elements you like to see from a player of his size. I think that that's kind of turned teams around. But the skill has always been there. And like I said, I mean, our OHL scout has been on his case since early September, October, and hasn't really changed much in terms of where he sees him on our board. He's always been a 15 to 25 guy. I had to fight him. I had to fight to keep him down earlier down in the season because I wasn't really sold. But as the season's gone on, it's just gotten clearer and clearer that he does deserve to be in that range. And I think he's closer to 15 than 25 now.
So we were talking about him a little bit kind of off mic just before we started recording, and we talked a little bit about kind of similar players who grew a lot in their like D-1 year and haven't really kind of figured it out. Like, so Owen Pickering was one that you mentioned. And is that kind of the biggest worry with Sennecke's game right now, is that he doesn't manage to figure this out? You know, I kind of likened him to when a puppy hasn't grown into their feet yet. Are you kind of confident that he's kind of going to work it out? Is that something that you think an NHL team will get hold of him and work it out? Or is it something that just kind of will come with time, with reps, things like that?
Well, that's the concern. That's the concern for me, is that, you know, we're talking about a player who, you know, when you grow that fast in such a short span of time, you have to rework your game. And we're not just talking, you know, hitting the gym, adding some muscle, learning to protect pucks better. It's about habits. When you're 5'10", 5'9", 5'10", you have to have different habits than if you're 6'2", 6'3". You know, the way that you approach playing between checks, the way that you approach getting off the boards, the way that you handle physical battles, the amount of leverage that you use, and just overall your positioning changes depending on whether you're 5'9", 5'10" with quick feet versus 6'2", 180 pounds with room to add weight, but still that uncoordinated element that comes with kind of an awkward, lanky teenager, right? So that aspect is really what's concerning me, is that it hasn't worked for Owen Pickering. Now, obviously, Owen Pickering's a defenseman. It's a different position. But the concern is still the same. Pickering grew like 6-7 inches in the year before his draft year, and he still hasn't learned how to kind of, you know, develop the habits that are required at that size. So other prospects don't need to rework their entire game. Sennecke kind of does, in terms of habits at least. The skill, again, is certainly there. He's a great handler, great shooter, a decent passer. But the habits do need to change, and old habits die hard. You know, it's a saying for a reason. So that's my concern a bit with Sennecke, is, you know, how far he can go. Now, we'll see in the next few years, but the examples we have of players in this kind of mold who grew a lot quicker, there's two options. There's Owen Pickering, which I mentioned, and there's Josh Anderson, who you mentioned. So we have an example of a player in Josh Anderson who reworked his habits around his newfound size, who learned to kind of just drive the net consistently, take pucks in transition and just drive them right to goal. And sure, that works, but the awareness, the hockey sense never really developed Josh Anderson. I feel like Sennecke's at least got a base to work with in terms of awareness and hockey sense. But again, I don't think he anticipates the game. I think he kind of runs and guns it. I don't think that's going to change, especially with the amount of work he needs to put into his habits. I don't think he's going to have enough time to work on his anticipation development-wise. So there's only so much you can work with, and I feel like in order for Sennecke to be a top 6 forward, the habits are really going to have to be the focus.
I'm going to continue my conversation with Hadi about Sennecke in just a minute, but first I want to tell you all about Indeed. There's no I in team, but there is one in Indeed, which is the hiring platform you need to build your team. When you're hiring, you need Indeed. It's the hiring platform where you can attract, interview, and hire all in one place. You don't have to spend hours on multiple job sites searching for candidates with just the right skills. Indeed is a powerful hiring platform that can help you do it all. They've got great tools to help you find matched candidates to really streamline the hiring process with things like Instant Match, which over 80% of employers get quality candidates whose resume on Indeed matches their job description the moment they sponsor a job if they use Instant Match. I have not been job hunting for a little while, but when I was, Indeed was the platform I used, so I can only assume it is just as good if you are the one doing hiring. Join more than 3 million businesses worldwide that use Indeed to hire great talent fast. Start hiring now with a $75 sponsored job credit. Upgrade your job post at Indeed.com/lockedon. Offer is good for a limited time. Claim your $75 credit now at Indeed.com/lockedon. Indeed.com/lockedon. Terms and conditions apply. You need to hire. You need Indeed. So this is a player that you think it's probably going to be, it's almost definitely going to be like a project player. You know, you draft him and you basically admit that he's probably 2 to 3 years away from the NHL. So he almost definitely goes back to Oshawa next season, maybe for another season. Like, what's the best case scenario with Sennecke?
Best case scenario is within 3 years you have a complimentary top 6 player, a player who can kind of just like Josh Anderson, just drive the net, improvise his way into scoring chances, and kind of take that ability to because he does it really well. He improvises extremely well, you know. I think that could work in a top 6, kind of like we see with Montreal with Josh Anderson, kind of the better years, not this year, but like the better years earlier on of Josh Anderson, where
we remember the good years of Josh Anderson here,
the good old days. Absolutely. But yeah, no, just the ability to create consistently with his size, his speed, his strength, and his handling ability. You know, if Sennecke ends up in that kind of role, that's the best case scenario. And at one point, Josh Anderson was talked about as a player who has first round pick, a prospect plus value. So, you know, if you're looking at pure trade value, the best case scenario with Sennecke is fairly high in terms of trade value. It's just, if Caden Lindstrom's on the board, if TJ Ginla's on the board, if Ivan Demidov especially is on the board, that has to be the direction that they take. I think that is way too early to pick Sennecke at 5. And I think if you trade down, let's say with Calgary at 9th and pick Sennecke, he's definitely going to still be available at 9, because from what I've heard, the only team that has him in their top 5 in terms of prospects is Montreal. So, you know, if they want to trade down because they really, really want Sennecke and they want to get some value out of it, I don't think teams 6, 7, and 8 are going to pick Sennecke either. So he's almost definitely going to be available at 9. So it wouldn't make sense to me for them to pick him up at 5. That's early.
Yeah. So whereabouts is he on your personal board? Like, at what point would you be okay with picking Sennecke?
Yeah, I'm due to put out some rankings at the end of the month, but Sennecke should be around the 15 range. He was around the 20 range in my last rankings, but around the 15 range is where I'm more than comfortable with him. Again, he's a project. He's a player who's going to take a bit more time. And I think his upside's a bit limited. I think if he does make a top line, it's really going to be as a third wheel on that top line, as a player who brings 1 or 2 very unique individual things to that line, but doesn't drive play, is mainly there as a support option. So, you know, there are players up until the 10th pick, I would say, you know, Cole Eiserman, Trevor Conley, those kinds of guys who could drive a top line at their best, you know, or be the key piece of a top line. And that kind of upside I don't really see with Sennecke. I see more as the safe projection with Sennecke as a middle 6 player. I think that there's very little doubt that he becomes a middle 6 player. It's just a matter of how effective he's going to be. I will say, though, the consistency's really impressed me over the last year. The consistency in growth and the consistency in performances. He doesn't have a lot of off games. Doesn't have a lot of bad games. He's a player who's almost always bringing something, and that obviously will turn a team or 2 on. But I don't know. It's just for me, the 15 range is where I'm comfortable with a player with like safe middle 6 upside. And you know, if you look at TJ Ginla, for me, the second line is his floor. Like the way that he plays, I don't see many scenarios in which NHL GMs and coaches look at him and go, "Oh yeah, that's not a top 6 player." Like he has everything that a top 6 player that they want out of a top 6 player. So the range of outcomes is shorter with Ginla, and all of them point towards the higher end of the lineup. Whereas with Sennecke, I feel like there are more outcomes possible, and most of them kind of point to a middle 6 or bottom 6 projection.
I want to talk about TJ Ginla for a second, actually, because so we're recording this on Sunday, May 19th for people who are are listening. And very recently, it's kind of come out that TJ Gindler is maybe in the conversation to be like 4th overall. He's definitely one of the guys that they're considering. The last time we spoke, I believe you had Zeev Buium as your pick for 4th overall. And for me, it's going to be really tough if guys like Demidov are still on the board, if Caden Lindstrom is still on the board, to pick someone else. But of the kind of guys that are being talked about in that 4th overall spot, so, let's, for the sake of argument, Demidov, Levchinov, Salayev, Lindstrom, Agindler, who's your choice there? And like, who do you think is most likely to still be there if we assume that, Demidov is probably going 2 or maybe even 3rd?
Yeah, so if Demidov's off the board, which he should be, honestly, for me, he's the second best prospect.
I'm making my peace with that. Like,
yeah, absolutely.
He would love for him to be available, but I'm not selling my soul on it,
For sure, and I also think that Columbus is more likely to go D anyway. It's a strong D class with a lot of options there. So between Salayev and Levchinov, whichever's available at 4, I think is going to be the Blue Jackets pick. More likely Salayev, because at right D you have David Jiricek. I think having Anton Salayev to his left would be a great combination of tools there. But, Caden Lindstrom is really, really, really good. Just a big mobile center who's just a pest on the ice, a great person off the ice. That combination really interests me. That combination of just being an amazing person by all accounts, all over the draft circles. Everyone's saying, how amazing of a person this player is. And then you get him on the ice and he is a demon. Like he's cruel at times. Like he'll cross check you in the ribs. He'll spear you. He'll just, after the whistle, just small things that really make you think this guy has a real competitive spirit. This is a player who wants to win and knows how to get under opponent's skin to maximize his chances of winning, and understands that the game is mental, not just physical. Very raw, very kind of still getting used to how to play at that size, still getting used to developing the habits and decision making. But with the amount of puck touches that he gets per game, I'm not concerned. He's going to have a lot of opportunities to improve that. Regarding Agindler, like I said, I think his floor is a second liner. I don't think his ceiling's as high as Lindstrom's. I think Lindstrom has so much room for improvement, whereas Agindler's kind of already playing the way that he could be playing in the NHL. But I still think that Agindler would be a good pick at 4. I just think that he's definitely a step below Lindstrom, in my opinion. So if the question is Lindstrom or Agindler, I would go Lindstrom. But Agindler still gives a lot of value, and he's been playing wing this year, but it's already confirmed he's going to be playing center next year. So he's going to get some experience at center as well. So kind of that ability to play in multiple positions is good. I think Lindstrom, he's going to spend the next 3-4 years as a center in the in the juniors and AHL, because this is a player who's going to take a bit longer because he needs to develop those habits, right? It'd be a shame to put him on the wing after that. Whereas with Agindler, he's been playing wing his entire junior career so far, and then he's going to be moved to center, so he can play center or wing. I think with Lindstrom, you're getting more value out of him at center. But regardless of where you go, regardless of what the Blue Jackets need, if they go forward, I would say Lindstrom Agindler at the top of it. At the assuming obviously that Demidov is gone. But if they're going defenseman, it has to be between Salayev and Levchinov, realistically. But I personally would still go Zeev Buium, because Zeev Buium is a difference maker. He's the definition of composure and clutch. He scored the insurance goal for Team Canada at the for Team USA rather at the World Juniors. As a draft eligible, and the only draft eligible on that roster. Literally, Canada did not. USA did not have to bring a draft eligible on defense. They had a bunch of drafted prospects, draft +1, draft +2s that were eligible. They still went for Zeev Buium. He played all the games for USA and was really, really good. And then he also scores the insurance goal for Denver in the national championship in the NCAA and was one of their best players, if not their best player. So for me, this is a player who consistently ups the stakes, consistently proves himself against tougher and tougher competition, has the skill, has the elusiveness, has the defensive ability, which no one really talks about because he's 6 foot. But for a relatively undersized defenseman, I think he defends better than Levchinov. He's more reliable, at least, than Levchinov. Levchinov has more range, more mobility, a bit longer stick, all that good stuff. But Buium understands defense better. Doesn't take as many risks, doesn't make as many mistakes. So defensively, I rate Buium higher. Offensively, I rate Buium higher. Levchinov's just an athletic freak and a hard worker, which teams love. But Levshinov, Demida, oh my goodness, I'm just rolling through names in my head here. Buyum is still my guy. I love almost everything that he does. He's got so many good qualities, and for me, he's a top 2 defenseman in this class.
Going to finish off my conversation with Hadi in just a second, but first I want to tell you all about FanDuel. It's winner take all time in the NBA and the NHL. FanDuel is giving you a shot to bring home a big win of your own. Right now, new customers are getting $150 in bonus bets with any winning $5 bet. So if you'd put money on Connor McDavid scoring the game-winning goal last night against the Dallas Stars, you would have won $150 that you could have used on spreads, money lines, player props, and more. Once again, any winning $5 bet. It doesn't have to be hockey. It doesn't have to be basketball. Find the heaviest favorite that you possibly can. Put $5 on it. And if you win, you're going to take home $150 in bonus bets. Just visit FanDuel.com/locked-on to get started and make every playoff shot count. Once again, that is FanDuel.com/locked-on. FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook. Yeah. Let's just kind of finish up here. I want to roll back to Sennecke for just a second.
Yeah.
Highly unlikely that the Blue Jackets take him at 4th. Almost impossible, I would say. But in the weird 2 steps to the left universe where they do, where does he fit into the Blue Jackets prospect pool in terms of like ranking?
Yeah, I think that, obviously a step below Fantilli. I think that he'd kind of be in contention with Gavin Brindley in terms of quality. They're both players who I think are really safe, who can play at an NHL pace. Gavin Brindley's a lot more translatable, has a lot better habits and did it already at the same age. There's a reason he was playing in Michigan's middle 6 in his draft year. Like, Brindley's a really good defensive player, understands the game really well, anticipates play really well. But in terms of overall upside and where they would slot in an NHL lineup, I think that Brindley and Sennecke are kind of neck and neck in terms of where they end up. I think that Brindley has, again, kind of less range in terms of where he ends up. I think that Brindley is a very safe middle 6 player. He's going to bring pace. He's going to bring defensive ability. He's going to bring a lot of energy. Whereas, again, Sennecke could end up anywhere from a third wheel on the top line to best player on the 4th line. So there's a bit more range, but overall, I think it evens out. And both are kind of neck and neck for me in the prospect pool for Columbus.
If people want to learn more about prospects, if they want to kind of maybe get a bit more of a deep dive into guys like Buim, guys like Lindstrom, where can they find you and your work online?
Absolutely. So wherever you're listening to this, just look up Locked On NHL Prospects, and you'll find Sebastian and I talking about prospects for 30 minutes a day, 5 days a week, all that good stuff. And Twitter's the one-stop shop. If you're watching on YouTube, my handle is right below my face there, HadiK_scouting. Just look me up. It's a one-stop shop. Everything I post goes there. So those are the 2 main spots. And just keep a lookout for our work at Dobber Prospects. We've got rankings coming out in June as well. Final rankings coming up. And I'll be at the draft as well, which is fairly interesting.
And that's all I've got for you today. Tomorrow, I'm going to try my best to get a bonus episode out just to kind of catch you all up on the GM conversations that are happening. I know there's a couple more names that have come out since then. If I don't, we'll talk about that next week. We're also going to have Dina Weinheimer back to do a Monsters Monday to celebrate the Monsters sweeping the Syracuse Crunch in their North Division final. They're moving on to the Eastern Conference final, which is very, very exciting. But should we be worried about Jet Greaves? We're going to talk to Dina about all of that early next week. Thank you for listening, for making us your first listen of the day every single day. Locked On Blue Jackets is free and available on all podcast platforms. We're over on YouTube. We're on Sirius XM. And you can also find me on Twitter at _Jacob Foster, JAKOBFORSTER. You can find the show at LO_Blue Jackets. You can find us on Twitter or on Instagram under that handle. And if you have comments, questions, criticisms, you can email me at lockedonbluejackets@gmail.com. Thank you once again for listening. And until tomorrow, make sure you stay locked on.